They say silence is golden, but for a high-value man, silence is strategy. When a woman provokes, nags, or tries to spark an argument, the average man feels compelled to respond, to defend, to justify. But the Stoic man knows something deeper. He knows that engaging is not strength, it's surrender. Every argument drags you into her frame. It says, "Your emotional chaos is my responsibility now." And that's the first mistake. The high-value man doesn't argue because he refuses to hand over his peace. He doesn't need to win the fight. He already won by refusing to enter the ring. When she sees you unfazed, when her emotional waves crash against the shore of your calm, that's when she feels your presence the most. Not in your words, but in your restraint. Not in your logic, but in your stillness. The moment you react, you lose posture. The moment you argue, you betray your frame. But the man she respects, the man she can't control, is the one who stays calm even when the storm begs for attention. A woman will often test a man not to see if he's right, but to see if he's stable. She'll poke, she'll provoke, she'll escalate, just to see what shakes you. Not because she wants drama, but because she wants to feel your gravity. And a man who argues, who defends, who fights back, he's proving that she owns his mood. But the man who can sit with discomfort, who can stay composed when everything screams for reaction, that man becomes rare, magnetic, untouchable. She may call you cold. She may accuse you of not caring. That's part of the test. She's not looking for an opponent. She's looking for an anchor. High-value men never argue because they know energy is currency. They don't waste it proving a point. They demonstrate their strength in their ability to remain unmoved. When she realizes her chaos no longer controls your peace, the dynamic shifts. You stop being the man she can push around and start being the man she can't forget. Because your calm isn't passivity, it's power. Silent, grounded, masculine power. When you argue, you're entering her frame. You're letting her lead the emotional dance. And once you're inside her emotional storm, she controls the weather. But a man who refuses to argue isn't weak. He's disciplined. He understands that true strength is not proven through words, but through presence. He knows that logic rarely penetrates emotion, and that his silence often speaks louder than any rebuttal. This isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about transcending petty power struggles. A high-value man listens, but doesn't absorb. He observes, but doesn't react. He holds space without losing his center, and in doing so, he becomes a lighthouse in her storm, steady, calm, unwavering. That's what she craves, even if she resists it. Because deep down, every woman longs for the man she can't shake. Not the one who yells louder, but the one who doesn't flinch. Not the one who tries to win the argument, but the one who never needed to argue in the first place. That's the essence of Stoic attraction. That's the rulebook few ever follow, and the one she'll never forget.
The high-value man knows that her emotional outbursts are not invitations to duel, but tests of grounding. He doesn't take the bait. When she throws chaos his way, he doesn't mirror it. He dissolves it with stillness. He doesn't try to outtalk her, outsmart her, or overpower her. He simply remains unfazed. That's what stings her the most. Not his words, but his unshakable calm. And that's what draws her in deeper. Because women don't bond through argument. They bond through emotional contrast. And when she's spiraling, what she truly seeks is a man who isn't. She wants to feel safe inside his energy, not at war with it. But most men fail this test. They personalize her moods. They argue, defend, explain, trying to be right instead of grounded. But the Stoic man? He has nothing to prove. His energy says, I see you, I hear you, but I won't descend just to meet you in your chaos. That energy? It's rare, and it's irresistible. He understands that the moment he tries to win an argument, he's already lost. Because the real loss isn't in being right or wrong, It's in stepping out of alignment with your own inner peace. She might scream louder. She might accuse. She might push every button you've got. But the Stoic man has removed the buttons. There's nothing for her to push. Not because he's cold, not because he's detached, but because he's in control of his inner weather. And in that silence, in that refusal to engage in emotional ping-pong, she starts to feel something she's not used to. Respect. Not just for you, but for herself. Because your presence doesn't escalate her, it regulates her. And over time, she begins to crave that regulation. She might not say it, but deep down, she values the man who doesn't flinch in the storm more than the one who shouts with her. When a man argues, he trades his power for noise. But when a Stoic man chooses stillness over reaction, he becomes an anchor. Women test men not always to challenge them, but to feel the edges of their strength. If you collapse, she learns where your breaking point is. If you resist the bait, she feels your depth. Not reacting isn't weakness, it's precision. It's knowing that not every fire deserves your flame. Most arguments aren't about logic anyway. They're about emotion, energy, safety, and nothing calms a storm like presence. That's why high-value men don't argue. They guide. They redirect. They absorb chaos and return clarity, not by overpowering, not by convincing, but by embodying the very thing she can't shake: certainty. A high-value man knows that disagreement doesn't require a defense. He understands that his truth doesn't need validation to exist. That's what makes him magnetic. He doesn't chase being understood. He offers his perspective once, clearly, and then he lets it breathe. No repetition, no pleading, no emotional entanglement. This silence is not cold. It's calculated. It tells her, I know who I am. If you can meet me here, good. If not, I'll still be here. And that energy, that refusal to be pulled into drama, is what disarms her. It forces her to reflect, to wonder, to recalibrate her own emotional chaos against the backdrop of your calm. Because here's the truth. When you argue, you descend. You meet chaos with chaos. But when you stay grounded, you rise. You become a mirror, not a sponge. Her emotions bounce off of you and back to her, forcing her to confront them instead of transferring them to you. This is not indifference. It's masculine discipline. A high-value man doesn't seek to dominate her emotions. He just refuses to be absorbed by them. And that refusal, that grounded stance, it speaks volumes. It says, I've trained my nervous system to choose peace over power plays. That's the kind of presence she remembers. Not the man who argued the best, but the man who never needed to. She may slam doors, raise her voice, or throw words like weapons. But the man she can't forget is the one who stays still in the storm. He listens without reacting, not to pacify, but to understand. And when he finally speaks, it's with clarity, not defense, with truth, not ego. He doesn't try to win the argument. He tries to win peace. And oddly enough, that's when she feels safest. Not when he agrees, not when he submits, but when he holds steady, like a mountain. Because deep down, women don't want a man who fights like them. They want a man who calms what they can't. And that's a rare kind of power. Arguing with a woman often feels like trying to untangle water with your hands. Every move just makes it murkier. A high-value man understands this. He doesn't fall for the bait of provocation. He doesn't raise his voice to match hers. He knows that emotional intensity is not always an invitation for combat. Sometimes, it's a cry for containment. So instead of matching fire with fire, he cools the flame with grounded presence. He might say little, but his body says everything. I see you. I'm here. And I'm not going to lose myself just because you've lost your center. That's magnetic. That's masculine. And that's why she keeps coming back. Not to the words, but to the way he made her feel when everything else was falling apart. When a woman feels your stillness in the middle of chaos, It rewires her nervous system. It makes her feel safe in ways she can't explain. Most men think they need to fix the issue, out-argue her, or convince her of their point. But the man who transcends all that, the Stoic man, understands that emotional storms aren't problems to be solved. They're energies to be witnessed. He becomes the eye of the hurricane, calm, present, unshaken. He may listen, he may nod, but he never abandons himself to win her approval. And paradoxically, that very detachment pulls her in deeper, because what she truly craves isn't agreement. It's anchoring. She'll test you, not because she wants drama, but because she wants to feel the edges of your frame. She wants to know where you end and she begins. If you get reactive, defensive, or try to mirror her emotion, you dissolve your masculine core. But if you stay grounded, if your energy says, "I'm here, I'm not moving, and I see you," she melts. Not because you dominated her, but because you didn't collapse. The Stoic man doesn't resist emotion. He doesn't shut it down. He lets it pass through the space he holds, like thunder rolling through a mountain range. He doesn't flinch. And in that stillness, she finds home. Most men think that being the rock means being emotionless. But that's not Stoicism. That's fear in disguise. Real Stoic presence is not about shutting down. It's about opening up without losing center. When she's angry, when she's spiraling, when she's trying to provoke a reaction, your job isn't to fix it. It's to feel everything and still choose calm. You don't need to agree. You don't need to convince. You just need to be unshakable. That's what disarms her. Not logic, not argument, but your refusal to abandon yourself just to win. The more reactive you are, the more power she has over your state, and she can feel it. Every raised voice, every defensive explanation, every sigh of frustration, it all says the same thing. You control me. But when your eyes stay calm, your breath stays deep, and your words stay few, the message changes. Now it says, "I am sovereign." And suddenly, the fire she tried to start dies in your silence. Not because you ignored her, but because you didn't let her storm become yours. She sees a man who can hold space, not lose himself. And that's the kind of man she can't forget. When a high-value man refuses to argue, it's not weakness, it's command. He doesn't need to win the moment. He's playing for deeper influence. He knows that peace isn't something you demand, it's something you embody. And when she sees a man who won't crumble under pressure, who won't chase approval, who won't fight petty battles, she feels safe, challenged, and intrigued all at once. Because deep down, every woman craves a man she can't shake. A man who leads with silence, with presence, with truth. And that's why she can't let go. Not because he chased, but because he stood still. And in that stillness, she found the mirror of her own chaos.